Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In Manhattan, the city that never sleeps, the glass tower of Stanford Industries rose majestically, towering dizzyingly high above Central Park. Up there, in this world suspended between heaven and earth, lived Richard Stanford, a man shaped by rigor and extreme discipline. At 52, he embodied the image of American success, a billionaire, a respected and feared CEO, the undisputed master of an industrial empire that bore his name. Yet beneath this veneer of invincibility, Richard was a broken man. His face, always clean-shaven, held a cold, impassive expression, but his eyes betrayed a deep loneliness, an inner emptiness that neither money nor power could fill. Widowed for 10 long years, he had never truly gotten over the loss of his wife, Emily, who died suddenly in a car accident. Worse still, he had lost their only son, Thomas, in the same accident, when the child was only 8 years old. Since that fateful day, Richard had deliberately closed his heart to the outside world. He shunned children, avoided family gatherings, and refused any form of tenderness or vulnerability. His life had fallen into a strict routine, where every minute was planned with military precision. He took refuge in his solitary dinners at Linden Grove, a discreet luxury restaurant nestled in the heart of Manhattan. There, he found a semblance of peace, in the anonymity of an elegant and hushed dining room, surrounded by an equally reserved clientele. Just a few steps away, backstage at that same restaurant, worked Jasmine Cooper, a woman whose life contrasted sharply with Richard's. An African-American woman in her 30s, Jasmine carried the weight of her dreams she had cast aside. A former promising musical theater dancer, her future had been turned upside down with the birth of her son. Leo, now 9 years old, suffered partial paralysis caused by a lack of oxygen during childbirth. Every day, Jasmine juggled long night shifts, multiple medical appointments, and the daily challenges of raising a child with a disability. Despite the difficulties, she radiated a quiet strength. Her gaze, gentle and determined, illuminated every gesture. Leo didn't speak much, but his smiles were bright, and he had a deep love of music. The great jazz classics, the ones his mother used to hum on stage, enchanted him. He moved to the rhythm of the notes, even though his movements were limited, and he seemed to carry within him an almost poetic grace. That evening, Jasmine had arrived at the restaurant more anxious than usual. Her usual assistant, an elderly neighbor who often babysat Leo after school, had to cancel at the last minute, a sudden bout of flu, fever, and dizziness. Jasmine hadn't had the heart to force a solution. She also couldn't afford to take a day off. Bills were piling up: rent, physical therapy, paratransit, medications, and Linden Grove was one of the few restaurants in New York City where she'd managed to hold down a steady job, despite its complicated schedule. So she made a difficult but necessary decision: to take Leo with her. She carefully placed him in a discreet corner near the cloakroom, away from direct view. This small space, usually reserved for luxury coats and umbrellas, became a little cocoon for her son for a few hours. She had everything planned: noise-canceling headphones, his sensory toys, an iPad with his favorite music, and a soft blanket he loved to curl up in. Leo was calm, curious, and always respectful of the space. Jasmine knew he wouldn't disturb anyone. But she also knew this world wasn't made for him. And still, she feared the stairs. Meanwhile, at the back of the main room, Richard Stanford entered as he did every evening at exactly 8 p.m. He wore a sober but impeccable suit, dark gray, tailored to the size of his head. His movements were slow, measured, almost ritualistic. He sat down at his favorite table, near the large bay window, where the city of Manhattan spread out like a living tableau. He loved this table. No one behind him. No one too close. Just the view, the lights, the quiet clink of silverware, and the reassuring murmur of a well-ordered world. Here, no one asked him questions. No one forced him to feel anything. As always, Jasmine was designated to serve him. Discreet, professional, efficient. He didn't know her first name. He'd never needed to. She did her job well, and that was enough. But that evening, something was about to escape Richard Stanford's precise control. In one corner of the room, a small jazz quartet had been hired to entertain the evening. The warm sound of a saxophone rose up, followed by the double bass and a muffled piano. The song they were playing was an instrumental version of Autumn Leaves, a nostalgic, enveloping, almost melancholic melody. The music reached Leo like a caress. He stopped touching his toys and slowly raised his head. He recognized the song immediately. His mother often hummed it when she was tidying the kitchen or when she thought he was asleep. He smiled. One of those smiles that lights up a whole face, that makes eyes shine, even when tired. Jasmine, pouring wine at another table, saw him out of the corner of her eye. She stopped. She knew that smile. It was the one of pure joy. The one that said, "I want to share this moment with you." She hesitated. The restaurant was crowded. The customers, elegant and sophisticated, expected impeccable service. The chef was demanding. And Richard Stanford, already seated, was not the kind of man anyone dared disappoint. But inside her, something stronger than fear asserted itself: love. Leo had so few opportunities to be himself in this world. She wasn't going to stifle this moment. She approached him gently, as if on stage. She leaned down, smiled, and whispered, "Do you want to dance a little, my love?" Leo nodded shyly, his cheeks slightly red. Jasmine took a small remote control out of her pocket. She pressed a discreet button on the motorized chair, the dance mode. A system she had installed herself with the help of a volunteer. The chair could then slowly pivot, make gentle circular movements, and gently undulate. And there, in this temple of luxury and control, amidst the white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers, a black waitress and her disabled son began to dance. Not a technical dance. Not a demonstration. But a communion. Jasmine circled Leo, light, almost airy. Her arms traced invisible arabesques. She wasn't looking at anyone else. Just her son. And he, his hands on the armrests, moved to the rhythm of the music, his eyes fixed on her, amazed. The notes of Autumn Leaves floated in the air, amplified by the gradual silence of the room. Conversations had fallen silent. Cutlery had stopped. One by one, eyes had turned towards them. There was no embarrassment or pity. Only unexpected emotion. A rare sincerity. Richard Stanford looked up. What he saw hit him like a gentle but brutal slap in the face. This wasn't a distraction. This was a moment of naked truth. Jasmine and Leo laughed softly. They laughed quietly, but their complicity shone like a bright light in a world darkened by social masks. They were alive, where everything around seemed frozen in a comedy of elegance. And for the first time in years, Richard felt his inner world waver. The room fell silent. The whispers had gradually died away, the cutlery had stopped clinking, and even the music seemed to have stopped, respectful of this rare and fragile moment. Richard Stanford held his fork suspended in the air, staring at Jasmine and his son. His mind, usually so clear and cool, was suddenly filled with a fog of emotions he couldn't quite identify. Something was choking him in his chest, a heavy, unfamiliar sensation, like an invisible weight placed on his heart without warning. He felt strangely small, vulnerable, as if a veil had been lifted before his eyes to reveal a forgotten truth. He no longer saw the waitress. He no longer saw the disability. He saw a connection. A strong, living bond, charged with an intensity that time and pain had erased in him. It was that thing he had lost. Or maybe never even really had. A simple, free, unconditional love. His mind swirled, as if caught in a whirlwind of memories and regrets. Why? Why does this affect me so much? Suddenly, a buried image resurfaced, clear and painful. He saw himself years ago in their suburban home, watching his son Thomas run barefoot in the garden in the pouring rain. Thomas was laughing out loud, his hair soaked, his clothes stuck to his skin, free and happy. But Richard, rigid and severe, had scolded him that day, not for his son's joy, but because a mud stain had stained the living room carpet. He then remembered Thomas's look, the look of a wounded and misunderstood child, a mixture of astonishment and sadness, almost a silent plea. "I just wanted to dance in the rain, Dad." This thought pierced him like an arrow. He had let so many precious moments slip away, trapped by his own fears and demands. The music started up again slowly, the quartet started the melody again, but the magic had already taken hold of the room. A few customers, at first hesitant, applauded timidly, then more confidently. A faint smile crossed Jasmine's face. Politely, she greeted Leo, then gently took him into her arms and led him back to his usual spot. But in his head, thoughts were racing. Was I too bold? Will I lose my job? She expected to be reprimanded, even expelled, for breaking the unspoken rules of this strict place. Against all expectations, this was not the case. Shortly after, Richard asked to speak to management. In a firm but not angry voice, he asked, "Who is this woman?" "Jasmine Cooper, sir," the manager replied. "I've been a waitress here for 3 years. She's an excellent employee, always punctual and professional." "And the child?" "His son. His name is Leo." Richard nodded slowly, as if to seal a silent decision. Then, without another word, he left the restaurant. No reproaches, no pompous speeches. Just that face, different. More tense, but also, strangely, more human. That evening, something inside him had begun to change. The next morning, as Jasmine was hanging up her apron in the small staff locker room, her phone vibrated in her pocket. An unknown number appeared. She hesitated. Unexpected calls rarely meant good news. "Hello?" she said, a little suspicious. "Hello, Miss Cooper. This is Ashbury and Klein. We're calling on behalf of the Thomas Stanford Foundation. We're pleased to inform you that your son, Leo, has been selected as the first recipient of a pilot program providing intensive support for children with mobility disabilities. All medical, logistical, educational, and cultural expenses will be covered for a period of 3 years, with the possibility of renewal." Jasmine froze. At first, she thought it was a mistake, or a bad joke. "Excuse me, are you sure? Who submitted our application?" "No one. The founder himself mentioned your name after witnessing a special moment involving you and your son. He was very clear, you are the inspiration behind this project." Her hand trembled. Her eyes misted over. She sat on a bench in the locker room, speechless, her heart pounding. It was surreal. Unexpected. Immense. But that was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the Thomas Stanford Foundation unfolded with formidable efficiency, like everything Richard undertook, except that here, it was human vulnerability he was serving. It offered scholarships to families forgotten by the system, supported special education centers, and funded research into assistive technologies. But above all, she launched a unique cultural program, Dancing Despite Everything, a project combining music, body expression, and choreographic chairs for children with motor disabilities. Richard Stanford didn't just write checks. He was coming. In person. At first, he stood back in the corners, dressed soberly, silently observing the rehearsals, the clumsy improvisations, the bursts of laughter of the children. Then one day, a little boy approached him and held out a paper flower. "Is that you, Mr. Thomas?" the child had asked, confusing the name of the foundation with that of its benefactor. Richard had smiled, a real smile, humble, broken, but real, and crouched down to receive the flower with an emotion he hadn't felt in decades. Those around him no longer recognized him. The man who had always been seen as cold, implacable, and inaccessible had become a sincere, passionate, sometimes awkward speaker, but one who vibrated with a new truth. He refused economic conferences to participate in roundtable discussions on inclusion. He financed the adaptation of several New York public spaces to accessibility standards, and campaigned for the implementation of artistic modules in special schools. And one evening, in a crowded amphitheater at Columbia University, standing before an audience of young graduates, he delivered a speech that made a lasting impression. Courage isn't measured by physical strength or financial power. It's measured by the ability to love, even when the world looks at you askance. I spent part of my life seeking power, running from pain, despising what was beyond my control. But one day I saw a little boy, deprived of the use of his legs, lead a dance with his mother, with more grace than anything I have been able to build in 50 years. That night, I understood. They are the real role models. Not me. Not my buildings. Them. And I owe them more than I can ever repay. Jasmine, for her part, still sought neither recognition nor pity. She continued her work, cared for Leo with the same fierce tenderness, and remained discreet in the face of the media attention the foundation was finally attracting. She knew that what she had offered that night was nothing less than a moment of truth, between a mother and her son. A fragile moment, one that the world had been gracious enough to witness. And Leo, at the age of 9, without realizing it, had broken through a wall of ice in the heart of a man everyone thought was unattainable. Simply because he dared to dance.